You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, as you could tell, I forgot my hat. I do that some Tuesdays when I run off to DBU and I'll leave my hat behind. I was going to borrow Josh's, but I don't know where it's been. So,
hey come on.
That's a cheap shot. A
little bit.
Are you ready to go to war, by the way?
Not in the slightest.
You're not going to go volunteer to go invade Venezuela, because that's what we're talking about today.
I mean, at some point I won't have a choice, right?
I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Who knows?
But we are going to. I think we're going to have literally going to have troops in Venezuela, which is not going to be a good thing. But I'm getting ahead of my stuff. Anyway, that's what we're talking about today, is what's going on in Venezuela, because I got real concerns about it, and not just because of the military aspect. A real strong constitutional opposition to what's going on down there. And, I've talked to a few people that said, well, other presidents have done it. Well, it doesn't make me feel better. I mean, yeah, you're right. I looked up a few other times. I could think of two very prominent examples of people prior to Trump doing what Trump basically is doing now. But that didn't make what Trump's doing now any better. It didn't make what they did any less unexcusable. I will give George H.W. Bush a small pass. I'll tell you why later. But it's not the war in Kuwait. It was the war in Panama. That's another deal entirely. I'm getting a little out of order here, but you could tell I got all my papers here. I got them all spread out and all that. So what'd you do with Thanksgiving, bud?
Just hang out with family. Had a lot of food.
Did you? Good.
Cooked
Good.
a lot of food, too.
Good for you. Yeah, good for you. All right. We had it at our place, and it was our first Thanksgiving without my father, which it really wasn't as weird as it might sound. It wasn't like a very sad or melancholy occasion. We told fun stories about him, and it was a good time. And Rob and my wife really, really did a fantastic job of getting it all put together at the house. Not just making it nice and neat, but it was like being served at a hotel kind of thing. She had it all laid out really nicely, and it's just she really did a great job, so that's nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You said at your place or at our place?
No, at my home. Not at not at the restaurant.
Auto.
No, not Otto's Joint. No, it's at my home.
Sweet.
Yeah, not that it would not have been a bad Thanksgiving at our place, which we might as well jump right in. All right, I take you to Otto at our place. I'll be there Thursday morning with the Sunday morning crew or Sunday school crew at Thursday mornings, and we'll probably bellyache about football some more. And I know I got a lot to bellyache about. My fighting Bears season's mercifully over. But basketball, doggone it. And that's tonight, too. We got a basketball game. All right. But anyway, our place is a great place. It really is. The people are nice. It's a relaxed place. You walk in there, a lot of the customers, a lot of the staff. It's a great place, just like Gina's. Gina's has become probably the go-to if I just want to, if I want like a fancy meal, we got 2 or 3 restaurants for that. But if I just want a nice meal with a nice atmosphere at a decent price, Gina's has become our go-to place, because I really liked their pizzas quite a bit. And last time I was there for lunch, I had their Chicago dog, and that's really good. And so I could recommend it, not just because he's my sponsor, because I am a patron, and I'm a very enthusiastic patron of both his restaurants. Also, my friend John Williams. Now, did you get any bad weather this weekend? Because we did a little bit on Saturday.
Yeah, quite a bit, actually.
We got some hail.
Yep.
And now I don't know if having damage, but I'm not going to guess either. I'm going to call John. I'll see John tomorrow at BNI, and I'm going to ask him maybe to squeeze me in for an inspection. Now, the hail I got was little bitty hail. I mean, about the size of pinheads, but it was enough. And the thing is, those things accumulate. And so we're going to have him check it out. And I'd have John check y'all out too, because if y'all did get more hail than we did, or get damaged, or you already have a damaged roof, the insurance company is going to make it difficult. So you need to really take care of these things. He is at 817-734-2756. So you be sure to hook up with John soon, because he's going to be very busy, no doubt. Also, thank you to Jeff Kelly, 817-781-0546 at the Wethington Agency, or Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com. He has several houses to show. He really is doing a lot of business here in Johnson County, and that's a good thing. He also doing a lot of business like Godly, say it right, silly, Godly and Joshua in particular. Those areas are growing, and we're going to be getting more and more, growth as this thing goes along, because it's how shall I say it? This is a growth area, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm sharing this with several people here, so you can hear everybody get a benefit of my knowledge and expertise. Isn't that nice? One more. All right. Yeah, there we go. Also, 88.3 The Journey. Thank you. All right, I got back on gear. 88.3 The Journey, where our friend Rich Hooper, a fellow member of the Chamber of Commerce, which I will have on probably in January. I'm going to, Melissa and the crew are very, very busy, but they got this big thing coming up in mid-February, the expo, the business expo over at Pathway, and it's a great, great thing. So if you remember the Chamber, then you need to talk to Melissa about getting involved with this. I don't know how much it costs. It's like $100 or $75, something like that. I let her tell you how much it costs, but still the point is it's well worth the money. It's one of the best things the Chamber does. But anyway, I was supposed to be talking about Rich Hooper. Rich at 88.3 The Journey, Christian Music. It is a nonprofit, so they need help sometimes, donations that do drives. It's a great thing to do. If at Christmas time in particular, you like Christmas music?
If done right, yes.
Oh, well, like that stuff you were listening to when you pulled up this morning?
Okay, that was a little different.
Okay, but no, I'm not a big Christmas guy.
No.
I'm not. I like Thanksgiving a lot better because you have food, family, and football in that order.
Exactly.
And so, and plus the thing about it, Christmas is like you do all this stuff and you work at it. And then the day happens is like, yeah, Merry Christmas to you too. Shut up. And, it's like, it's just a big, I don't know, a lot of activity. Anyway, so listen to 88.3 The Journey. There, that's good. Let's talk about Venezuela. Venezuela used to be one of the richest countries in South America because of all the oil they had. They used to be, one of our best allies as well, one of our best trading partners and all that. And then about 25 years ago, they were taken over by Hugo Chavez, who a colonel in their army, had a military takeover, and they nationalized the industries and the banks or whatever else, and they imposed a very socialist regime and a very repressive one. And now Chavez died, and he was replaced by Nicolas Maduro, who is a former bus driver, who is basically a dictator, and he's even worse than Chavez. And Venezuela's had basically an emptying out of their population. I tell you, the country that's really paying a heavy price for what's going on in Venezuela is Colombia, because there's like estimate 2 million Venezuelan migrants in Colombia because they're trying to escape the incredible poverty that Chavez Maduro has inflicted upon this country. Venezuela is now one of the very poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. It's on the same status as Haiti, which has been notoriously poor for generations, right? And so the point is that they took a country that was very prosperous and had a lot of money and was very modern and had great facilities for education and infrastructure and whatever else, and that's all gone to crap in the last 25 to 26 years. And there you go. The only business that's thriving in Venezuela is the drug trade, which is the predicate of what Mr. Trump is doing. So have a little brief overview of what's going on right now. We have a clip from this weekend's news, so if you would, please.
A new sign of aggression coming from President Trump toward Venezuela, along with a new report of a phone call between the president and that country's leader, Nicolas Maduro, late last week, according to the New York Times.
We warned them, stop sending poison to our country.
Any direct contact stands out because the U.S. this week designated Maduro the head of a foreign terrorist organization and led 3 months of deadly strikes at sea, bombing vessels, the administration says, transport illegal drugs. More than 80 killed. Now President Trump is ramping up his threat.
And we'll be starting to stop them by land also. The land is easier, but that's going to start very soon.
This week, Maduro engaged in his own saber-rattling. However theatrical, he also met with his military, pledging to defend every inch of Venezuela. Tuesday, the president told reporters he might talk to Maduro, but did not indicate any call had already happened.
If we can save lives, if we can do things the easy way, that's fine. And if we have to do it the hard way, that's fine too.
Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited the USS Gerald Ford in the Caribbean and stopped in the Dominican Republic amid the U.S. buildup.
In waging this war on narco-terrorists, we're willing to go on the offense. Go on the offense in a way that changes the dynamic for the entire region.
Kelly is traveling with the president in West Palm Beach and is joining us live tonight. And Kelly, any escalation with Venezuela could mean some new criticism for the president from lawmakers on Capitol Hill.
We've already seen Democrats and a few Republicans who have questioned the legal justification for the Trump administration's operations in the Caribbean. Congress typically must authorize military action in another country. The administration has defended its operations so far, citing national security to interdict the drug flow. Hallie?
We thank you for
All
watching.
right.
And remember, stay updated.
I almost spit out my coffee when Trump said taking them by land will be the easy part. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be easy. But let's go have some background on what's going on, not just for Venezuela, but for all this. First of all, I've talked about this before, how the president basically has taken over power that has been legitimate given to Congress and the Constitution, but the Congress won't do anything about it. And it's not just with Trump. It was the same with Obama, same with any president you want to talk about since Truman's time, practically. Now, normally what had happened is the president would get authorization and then be given a blank check like they did in Vietnam to do whatever they want, okay? And similar to Afghanistan and Iraq. The point is that we haven't declared war on Venezuela yet. We're basically conducting war on Venezuela. A very unsympathetic country, like I just described, is terrible. And Maduro is not a good man. Venezuela is not a friend of ours. We don't recognize their government, which makes that phone call that Trump made, if it's true, and I say if it's true, very out of the norms for a president to speak with a leader of a country we don't recognize. We do not recognize Maduro as a legitimate leader. And so the only evidence we have of that call, if there is any, is just the Pentagon saying, yeah, it happened. But we don't have the transcripts like we did with the Ukraine business in the first administration that led to all that impeachment. But the point is that he has chosen Venezuela as the target because of all the drug trade. I'm going to get back to that point in a minute because there's two countries that really, if we're going to be talking about interdicting drug trade, why are we not talking about Mexico? Why are we not talking about Honduras? Why are we talking about Venezuela, who on the order of scale, it sends less drugs to our country than the two countries I just mentioned? Okay. First of all, let's talk about something called the War Powers Act in 1973. It was passed in response to what Johnson and Nixon were doing in Vietnam and Southeast Asia, and it was supposed to restrict the president's ability to have such a free hand at directing military activities. With Nixon, of course, he secretly ordered the bombing of Cambodia and Laos without any congressional knowledge of it. So they passed a law, and basically it says about three things. One is that when the president sends troops into a military situation, he has 48 hours, rather, say it right, 48 hours to notify the leaders of Congress. Didn't say get their permission, but notify. The 60-day part comes that he must, within 60 days, after he's put troops into military situations in a military conflict, he must get authorization from Congress, which is what George W. Bush did both in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they got what they called an authorization of the use of military force, an AUMF, that only recently expired. It's been the basis of all the stuff we've been doing. Now, Obama used it, even had nothing to do with what the original AUMF was about. And after a certain 60 days, if that is not approved, they're supposed to, bring the troops home, which is never going to happen because the first thing you do is, if you're the party that demands the troops be brought back, it's going to be used against you in the next election, that you didn't stand by the boys and men and women of our troops and, this other business. It'll be a political hammer be used against you. So they're not going to do it. And there never has been a vote, even a contemplation or a discussion about bringing troops home from military situations since that thing was passed. It's not really even been enforced. And the last part of it is the president is supposed to have these conversations with the leaders of Congress on a periodic basis. Well, who's going to define that? And particularly these days. Now, have other presidents done what Mr. Trump's doing now? Yes, I'm going to take two examples. One is 1989. You might like this one, Josh, because listen to that music you were listening to. We can thank Motley Crue and all those 80 hair bands for getting rid of Manuel Noriega. You heard that story before?
No, that's a little before my time, unfortunately.
Hey. Motley Crue's go back on tour. It'll do you some good.
All right.
Anyway, what happened was Panama was being led by Manuel Noriega. He wasn't the elected president. He was just kind of like the dictator-in-chief. And he also was sending drugs to the United States. Panama was a very strong a point of departure for a lot of drugs coming in from South America. And so Mr. Bush, H.W. Bush, sent the Marines in to take him out. Now, he did not get authorization to do that, okay? He basically sent the Marines in. What was funny about it is Noriega holed himself up in the Cuban embassy, and so what the Marines did, they got these massive amps and started blasting hairband 24/7. White Snake and Cinderella and Poison or whatever else, blasting it in multi-decibels. And finally, after about 3 days, the Cubans gave up Noriega. They said, basta, enough. And they threw him out. And he spent, up until about 2 years ago, he spent time in the maximum security prison in Indiana. All right. Now, a lot of people back then, I don't remember either party getting really that worked up about it because Noriega also was threatening to blow up the Panama Canal if we did anything at all. And so, there were some complaints, and it only lasted a week, and we had no casualties and all this other stuff. And so there was not a great deal of hair pulling. The second was 2011, where Obama bombed Libya, which resulted in the death of Gaddafi, another terrible human being, nobody we would have any sympathy for. And what had happened, though, is it turned Libya into basically this lawless zone now. It also led to the trouble at the Benghazi embassy and all this other business where 4 Americans, including our ambassador, were killed and things of that nature. And Obama didn't even bother telling Congress about it. When he said, hey, you're supposed to let us know, he basically said the letter's in the mail. I'll let you know later. He just did it all on his own. Plus, here's the thing Obama did that a lot of people on left and right did not like, is he basically used drones to take out terrorists. And it was Obama himself that was picking out the targets. Okay, it wasn't like there's some sort of organized plan. Basically, they handed him a list of names, and he'd say this one, and this one, and Obama would take them out with the drones. And I remember it led to this 13-hour filibuster with Senator Rand Paul over that, because he said that there was nothing that would keep him from using them against American citizens. In fact, a couple of targets were disaffected American citizens that had defected over to Al Qaeda, but he was, Rand Paul made a big deal about this. When was this? This was throughout the administration of Mr. Obama. So my point is, what's going on now isn't the first time it's happened. My second point is, it doesn't make it better. It doesn't make what Obama did okay. It doesn't make what other presidents have done in the use of military power. We bombed Kosovo or Serbia over Kosovo for 70 days without congressional authorization back in 1997. Okay? We got involved in Somalia without congressional authorization. That's the basis of the movie Black Hawk Down. I mean, we did a lot of we've done a lot of things. Reagan did at Grenada without authorization. The thing about it is, he said, well, we need to act fast against these people. Well, that's what a politician and a president's supposed to do, is get people on his side to make this happen, not just do it. But it's just become more egregious, I think, with Mr. Trump, because he doesn't even bother going through the motions of what's going on in the world. And basically, you look at what's going on in Venezuela, and he says they're a narco-terrorism, and we need to take them out, and all this. And then, I'm going to talk about at the end of the show, he pardons the Honduran presidents doing the same thing that Maduro's doing. Okay, anyway, let me just get to some of the data here. First of all, over the weekend, Mr. Trump declared a no-fly zone over Venezuela. Let's be quite clear. I'm reading from the Washington Post here. By the way, side note, I pulled most of the information for this show in 4 sources: Post, Times, Wall Street Journal, National Review. So I think I covered all the spectrums. And to all 4, and including other publications, all 4 of them, are on the same page of the hymnal on this one. Particularly the conservative ones are the ones that are the most critical. I mean, the National Review has been very critical of this whole operation for various reasons. But anyway, over the weekend, he declared a no-fly zone. Now, be very clear, Trump does not have the legal power to close the airspace over another country, even as he appeared to be threatening an attack or seeking to push Venezuela's leaders to think he was contemplating one. So what he declared, he has no authority to do. Now, if we had a declared war against Venezuela, then no war or no air power shutdown would be necessary because we're in a state of war, and that's going to be part of it. But to do it against a country we're not at war with, he didn't have the authority to do that. And how he's going to enforce it, we only can guess. All right? Is he going to shoot down Venezuelan jets or other aircraft of other kind? Shoot down their drones? Okay. He doesn't say. Of course, he's always like, to be seen later. Trump is a master of very soon. It's coming. It's going to be awesome and amazing next week kind of thing. But anyway, he says, to all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Again, if we were at war with Venezuela, this is part of the deal, but we're not. And so what we're doing, is, when I got pushback on my opinion about this, is these guys are terrible human beings. They're drug dealers. They're human traffickers. Yes, they are. But what differentiates us from the animals that these people are is that we have the process to deal with these people, but we have to do it through the appropriate process. Okay, if Congress would declare war or allow this to go on, given the authorization to do these things, I would really have a very short show. I may not be excited about what they're doing, but it would have no real basis of my argument. But by doing this, without any kind of consideration of the Constitution or Congress at all, that's very difficult for me to support. I know what kind of people we're talking about. I know these people are terrible human beings, and I'm not bleeding over their deaths. But the point is that we have to do this the way our Constitution sets it out to maintain the difference between us and some terrorist state. That, the difference is we have a Constitution, we have political norms, we have customs, values, morals that somebody like Venezuela and Maduro does not. And this is what distinguishes us. And when we use lethal force, it has to be in a necessary and appropriate situation. Is this a necessary and appropriate situation? You make the case if it is, Mr. President. If you really feel like that this is a threat to our country, go to Congress, say, I want this to happen, and let the politics work themselves out. All right? Don't just do it. But the point is, that's what's happening here is that, they're just doing it without any kind of regard to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11, which is the War Declaration Act, or passage, rather. This is what, when I had this conversation with 2 or 3 of my good friends, and they said, but, he is stopping the flow of drugs from Venezuela. Okay, that's a legitimate goal. Go to Congress with it and say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. Also this idea, like I mentioned, he spoke by phone last week to Nicolas Maduro. I'm very skeptical. Honestly, I really am. And also what's happened is when members of Congress have demanded to have some action on this, the Pentagon has basically shut them out. And when they bring them in for conversations, the Pentagon is like, it's classified, and members of Congress go, but we get classified information. We're eligible for that. We get the clearance for that. And they're like, well, we can't tell you. And when they want legal justification, the Pentagon says, go pound sand, basically. They told them that they were too busy to send lawyers over there to explain what's going on. Now, what really has heightened a lot of this in terms of the controversy was an episode that happened not very long. Well, it happened in September, actually, come to think of it. But it only came out recently that one of the strikes left survivors, and they went in for a second hit and took out the survivors, which the controversy with that is that violates international law. When an act of war is done and you have survivors, the survivors are not supposed to be killed. Okay, that's the code of conduct of war internationally. And Pete Hegseth is now trying to backtrack, saying I never said what they said I said. But anyway, he puts out on one of his X. This is a little while back when the Washington Post put out this report about us knocking out survivors. He put out a post saying these highly effective strikes are designed to be lethal kinetic strikes. Every trafficker we kill is affiliated with a designated terrorist organization. Our current operations in the Caribbean are lawful under both U.S. and international law, with all actions in compliance with the law of armed conflict and approved by the best military and civilian lawyers up and down the chain of command. Rubbish. All right. Maybe he got, people say, yeah, go ahead and it's okay. But this is rubbish. It is not according to the war rules of combat. Okay, we expect survivors and prisoners to be treated appropriately, and if you want to get into, well, did they do that to us? That's again a differentiating point between us and them. Okay, and when we start taking on the mentality and the tactics of our opponents in these things, then we're no different. Okay, and that's the deal here. Okay, is that when we conduct these things, legally or illegally or authorized or unauthorized, there are still rules of combat to be followed. And this is an act of, is a war crime is basically what it is. Now, Hegseth will go on and say, I never said any of those things. That's just something the Washington Post made up and all this. And Mr. Trump is on Air Force One. He said Sunday he has great confidence that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth did not give a spoken order to kill all crew members aboard a vessel suspected of smuggling drugs in the Caribbean in September. Trump said Hegseth told him he did not say that, and I believe him 100%. Well, if that's true, then the pilots that did that action are going to be court-martialed and in prison, which is not going to happen because they were following orders. Now, here's the thing. I had a nice little debate with somebody in my family the other day about following orders. Okay? Is there a point in which a person in the military says, I can't do this, even if it is the orders? What I would say about that, and a lot of, about 6 members of Congress also put out a video saying you don't have to follow immoral orders. All right. Here's the thing. In that video, they quoted the military code of justice, okay, about immoral orders, which basically gives them the ability not to follow orders that they know to be crimes and whatnot. So what those members of Congress said was not illegal. A lot of people thought it was treasonous. To have members of Congress remind the men and women in our uniform what they're there for and what they represent, and part of that is not just obeying the code of justice, but part of that is also, bringing a sense of morality into this. Well, that's something to be discussed. I mean, we can't just say, well, they were following orders. That was what the German Nazis said to Nuremberg. That's what the guys at My Lai massacre in 1969 said in Vietnam. We were just following orders. There's a point in which following an order crosses the line into immoral activity. And the fact that this is all being done at the behest of the Trump administration without any kind of support from Congress or the American people, at least expressed through Congress, makes it even that more difficult. Now, I hate the fact that we're putting our men and women in these kind of positions. Okay? Well, I really hate the fact that we're forcing them to make these kind of moral choices. The orders and the authorization should be clear, the objective clear, and if we had all that and you still had somebody that says, I'm not doing it, and it crosses all the T's and dots all the I's, then we have a different conversation entirely. Okay? You really can't have a military that says, I'm going to do what I feel like doing. But on the other hand, we can't have a military that basically has no restraints or controls on it either. And that's why so many of the scenes of Vietnam were so horrific to us. Because we saw men and women in American uniforms committing some pretty nasty things. All right? And we can't have that. In the Iraq War, we had some at that Abu Ghraib prison. That's not America. We don't torture prisoners. I don't care what Dick Cheney said. We don't do that. All right? And so these things that we're talking about, are putting our men and women in positions that jeopardize their careers and sometimes their lives because we're not doing it the right way. Okay, that's part of it. Also, if you would put up, Josh, if you put up that map of Venezuela with the crew, if you're listening to this, you're not going to see it, obviously. But what you're looking at, if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, is you're looking at where our ships are, and we are at the highest level of concentration of troops, probably since maybe Panama back in 1989, or probably even in our history, probably since Spanish-American War. Who knows? When Trump starts talking about men and women going into Venezuela on the ground, and according to him, that's the easy part. What a nitwit thing to say. That's the easy part. I saw that this morning when I was astounded when he said that. Anyway, back to the matter. My question is, we're supposedly going to be doing this very soon. What are we going to do as American people when the casualties start mounting? We can't have this kind of action without taking some hits ourselves. Venezuela, it may be beaten down country, but they have weapons and they have allies. North Korea, Russia, Cuba, Iran, and I don't know how much aid they'll give them, but they'll get it. And I think there'll be a lot of countries that don't like the United States who want to use this opportunity to take out some of our armed forces just because it's their only way of really inflicting any pain on us. Are we willing to take that kind of sacrifice of our men and women for a war that never really needs to be fought? Now, this is the same thing they said in Vietnam, and we could have that conversation, another time. But this is what's happening here: is we've chosen this country because they send drugs to our country. All right, other countries do the same. We have no conversations about invading them. And like I said, Mexico sends much more in terms of fentanyl and other hard drugs into our country, either from Mexico or through Mexico. Yet we're not, and Trump started talking about bombing the cartels and all this other stuff. Well, that's an act of war in Mexican territory. And why we don't do that, there's a whole raft of reasons. I think politically it'd be disastrous. Plus, I think, a lot of people would have very, very deep concerns about bombing a neighbor without any kind of rationale, without being debated and adjudicated in the courts, or not courts, rather, in Congress. Okay? It really is a real problem when we get these other countries and we pick on Venezuela. Why? I really do think the reason why we chose Venezuela is, A, they can't fight back as hard. Second of all, is because the allies that I just mentioned, particularly Iran, okay, they don't want their presence here in the Western Hemisphere. It's not too different than what we thought about Cuba in 1962. I think the Russians would probably help out because they see us helping out in Ukraine off and on when Trump feels like it. And I think they'd use that. I think if we do invade Venezuela, like he's talking about, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult situation because I don't think, Venezuela by itself can't defend itself, but I don't think they'll be by themselves. All right. I mentioned Honduras. This staggered me. Why? Here's the article from, there he is. Here's the article from the National Review yesterday. Why is President Trump pardoning a notorious convicted drug trafficker? The guy on the left, if you're watching this, is Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras. Just recently the former president. In Trump's first term, his brother, Juan Antonio Hernandez, that must have been confusing around the house, was a major drug trafficker, and he did so with President Hernandez's support, his brother's support. And he also, President Hernandez, took $1 million payments. He also allowed the Mexican cartels to operate freely in Honduras and Honduran ones as well. The thing about it is that Hernandez is exactly what Maduro is. He is a narco trafficker who is running a country into the ground. Honduras is one of the poorest countries in Central America, primarily because of the gentlemen on the left and the drug traffickers that are just basically running rampant all over that country. And Hernandez was given gifts from the Sinaloa cartel, and what was that? What's the one that starts with a Z, and all this other stuff? I forget, the Zacatecas or something like that. There's so many of them, but no, there's all these cartels down in Central America and Mexico, and basically that he was everything Maduro is a narco trafficker. Okay, I'm going to just read here that here's what happens. This particular article is from the Wall Street Journal. Okay, that basically after a 3-week trial, and this is in Manhattan, by the way, a jury found Hernandez guilty of conspiring to import cocaine into the United States and possessing and conspiring to possess destructive devices, including machine guns. So he's also sending weapons in here into the United States from Honduras. Okay, it was a jumping off point for a lot of this. And he got 45 years in jail. Well, Mr. Trump pardoned him Friday after spending about 2 years in jail. Why? Because he didn't think he was properly tried. Mr. Trump said it was unfair. People told him that Mr. Hernandez was framed or whatever else, when the evidence was overwhelming that he was very up to his eyeballs in all this, okay? And, he's basically saying things like, we're going to stuff so much cocaine up the gringos' noses and they'll never even know it. And that's a quote, okay? And they have him, showing off gifts from the cartels. They show him meeting with cartels. They show, they had the bank records, the whole thing. He got 45 years. Well, Mr. Trump said he was unfairly tried, and therefore I'm pardoning him. He was going to spend 45 years in maximum security prison. Not anymore. And I'm thinking, what is the matter with this guy? How can you justify a war against Venezuela because of narco-terrorism and then pardon a narco-terrorist who is equally, if not more so, involved in Maduro? It doesn't make any sense. You talk about undermining your whole rationale for your case. You want to send men and women into Venezuela to take out this narco-terrorist, but you just pardoned a guy who's doing the very exact same damn thing. I don't feel like for me. I'm not going to say that there was money transacted or anything like that. I don't have any evidence of that. I haven't read anything like that. I'm saying there's got to be some reason why Hernandez got a pardon and we're going to war against Maduro. Okay? That's why the whole thing about, we got to take out Maduro because he's a threat and we need regime change. Well, if that's the case, then this son of a gun, I use that term lightly, on the left, Mr. Hernandez should be spending another 43 years in jail if he lives that long. But not anymore. And basically they asked him, he was on Air Force One. I'm going to read you some of the conversation. When they were on Air Force One, they was asked about it. Question, can you explain more about why you would pardon a notorious drug trafficker? Mr. Trump says, well, I don't know who you're talking about. Which one? Okay. Which one? Okay, you just all right. You just pardoned a 45-year prison sentence. And I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you talking about? What drug? What are you talking about? And they say it's Juan Orlando Hernandez. And Trump says, well, I was told, I was asked by Honduras, many of the people in Honduras, he said it was a Biden setup. Okay, so everything's Biden's fault. I get it. I don't mean Biden. Biden didn't know who he was alive, but it was the people that surrounded the Resolute desk, surrounded Biden when he was there, which was about a very little time. And the president of Honduras really thought he was set up, and it was a terrible thing. He was the president of the country, and they basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country. And they said it was a Biden administration setup. And I looked at the facts, and I agree with them. Bullcorn. He didn't look at a damn thing. All right, first of all, Trump doesn't read the briefing messages. Second of all, I don't understand why he would take the word of people that are probably invested in Hernandez's release, why he'd take their word for it and say, okay, he was unfair, and it's a Biden thing. And they asked, what evidence can you share that he was set up and that he wasn't? Well, you take a look. I mean, they could say that. You can take any country you want. If somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life. And he goes on and said, that includes this country. To be honest. I mean, if somebody does something wrong, do you put the president of the country in jail? They said it was a Biden setup. It was a Biden administration setup. And you have a big race going on this week. Actually, their elections are today, in fact, in Honduras. And I think it's going to be a very important race and all this other stuff. It's just sleazy stuff. And I'm angry about it. I really am, because this isn't the first cheesy, greasy pardon that Trump's done. He also pardoned the Bitcoin master. I forget his name, the Chinese guy. All right, I'm not really good at the names. Do you know what I'm talking about, Josh? It was one
Not off the top of my head.
Well, yeah, it was one of the leaders of Bitcoin, and cost a lot of investors a lot of money and got pardoned. Why not? And it's just what we're doing in Venezuela. Kind of sum this up is that, how shall I phrase this? What we're doing in Venezuela, if it is necessary, and I have my doubts, but if it is necessary, Mr. President, make the case. And I don't mean on Air Force One. I don't mean on, Fox News. I don't mean on those White House meetings where you call reporters bad names and act like a tough guy and a bully. I'm talking about in front of the United States Congress and in front of the American people. If you think it's that important to put our men and women in harm's way, make the case. If you don't, or you don't think you'll get what you want, that doesn't mean that you get to do what you want anyway. So yeah, I'm opposed to what's going on in Venezuela. Not just because, well, let me rephrase. I'm opposed to what's going on in Venezuela because I am not sure this is in our national interest. I know they send drugs, but so, like I said, Mexico probably dwarfs how much Venezuela sends us, and we're not talking about anything like this with them. And I'm not advocating, by the way, don't take that as we ought to be doing this in Mexico. Absolutely not. There are other ways to deal with this problem than invasion. I do not think invading Mexico would be in our best interest at all. You know who is another major drug importation company? Canada. Okay? But we're not talking about invading Canada. We've done that twice in our history. Did you know that? We tried to invade Canada twice, and they beat our brains out. In the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, they handed us our butts. And so I don't want to do that again. But if this is really in the best American interest, Mr. Trump, make the case. Give us a reason why we would risk our people and our equipment and our reputation or whatever else, and money and whatever else you want to talk about. Why is this necessary to put those at risk? And it's not good enough to say, well, I'm the president. Article 2 lets me do it. They're bringing in drugs. We need to get rid of Maduro. No. That's a reason why the founding fathers put the power of war in the hands of civilians called the United States Congress. There's a reason why the founding fathers put so many restrictions about the use of war and the use of military. There's a reason why we go through the processes we go through to legitimize national priorities, not your priorities. There's a reason why we go through these very tedious political processes and have to endure the grandstanding on both sides to make sure that when we do these things, we're doing it as a united country and not based on whatever mood Mr. Trump woke up in that day. So that's what I have to say about that. Did you learn something today, Josh?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I need to start taking notes.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I said. Yeah, I always say that in class anyway. And speaking of notes, that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. I'm going to be talking about state of education, which, should we be concerned? And the answer is absolutely yes, for a lot of reasons. I got a lot of slides and stuff you're going to be putting up on the screen.
Yay.
All right. I appreciate the sponsors. I know we were talking about war and all this stuff, but there are a couple of nonprofit things we need to remind ourselves of. One is that Toys for Tots is tomorrow over at the Burleson Stadium from 6 to 9:30. So if, you work in a later shift or whatever, you'd still make it. They're going to be out there pretty late. So go by, drop off toys over at Burleson ISD Stadium, formerly known as Elk Stadium. Still drives me nuts. Jack Matson, appreciate seeing you there. I'll be seeing him tomorrow. He's another BNI friend. So if you can't make it tomorrow night, they have boxes all over town. Most restaurants and retail outlets have it. I know that the Wethington Agency has one over at Jeff Kelly's outfit. I know both Gina's and our place have them. I know Old South has one. That's where you meet. So there are lots of places to donate. And also on the 13th, I believe the date is. Yes, it is. The 9th Annual Burleson Christmas Ball with the Center for ASD. They also be helping out Toys for Tots. And that's going to be a nice, formal, not formal. It's not going to be like a, tuxedo, but don't wear a t-shirt. All right. Have some class. Anyway, it's going to be over at the Loft Rustic Creek Ranch starting at 6:00. And that's over near Jellystone. So if you want to go to that, that'd be great. Call the people at the Center for ASD, talk to Lisa and see what they have to say. All right. Well, I feel better. I got that off my chest. All right. So I'm sure Mr. Trump is listening to this and says, that Allard, he makes good sense. You think so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he should. All right. I know a lot of people don't agree with this, and that's fine. I get it. We're talking about terrible human beings that we're dealing with. But we don't want to become terrible human beings to deal with it. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Okay. On that note, I will see you on Thursday.